dealing with Democrats all day, they're a little bit worried. The math looks pretty tough. It looks as though they have the more difficult task in the next 4 weeks to keep the Senate.
They are still holding out some hope of keeping the Senate, Jake, but you're dead right on that point. They have a much more difficult math.
So let us move forward here from a concept that as many of the polls predict, the Republicans will win the Senate and will be in complete control of Congress. So then, what happens next? Welcome to Midpoint syndicated writer, talker, and right-side blogger Alana Burke, and president of Bannon Communications Research, a Washington, D.C.-based political and consulting firm that helps Democratic candidates, Brad Bannon. I thank you both for joining us here today.
Thanks, Ed.
Glad to be here.
Brad, seeing as you're from the left, and this is something that they say the left is in arrears on right now, I'll start with you. Are you going for all the polls right now that say this could be a clean sweep?
Well, I looked at two of the analysts, and I checked this morning. Nate Silver and Charlie Cook have a 60% probability that the Senate's going to turn Republican. But if you read their analysis, they both caution that by saying there are several races that are still very close and will determine the tide. Colorado is close, Iowa is close, Georgia's close, and Kansas is close. And the Republicans are indeed headed towards picking up some Democratic Senate seats, but at the same time, there are a couple of Republicans who are in big trouble. Yeah, I think the odds are the Republicans do win, but I wouldn't count their proverbial chickens until they hatch.
Alana, let's get it to you now, because there's an awful lot of people on the right who are, as a matter of fact, celebrating at this point, and they're getting ready for what comes next. So before I deal with what comes next, do you believe then, as you look at these political races right now, that the Republicans have plenty of reason to celebrate and maybe shouldn't worry as much?
I actually think it's a toss-up, and there's a couple of reasons why I think this. I watch the numbers, I look at the aggregates, I never look at one single poll, but I do look at aggregated polls from Real Clear Politics or something like that. But for me, these numbers, they reflect a trend, but as we know in advertising or in media, all it takes is one scoop, one negative ad, something that can turn what is often a fickle voter, turn them overnight. So if I were to say that reasons for the Republicans taking the Senate, it would be this. It's not necessarily the races as they are now. All of the millions of dollars have been put into advertising, all of the various scandals, whether they're trumped up or not trumped up, situations where bad judgment has been used. Even in the ads, bad judgment has been used. There have been some ads that have been put out that should not have been approved, and they reflect poorly on the candidates on both sides. But here's what we have to look at. If you look at the country right now and how disillusioned the country is with President Obama, no, he's not on the ballot, but his policies are on the ballot.
Okay, now, do you go for that? I'm going to stop you there for a second here, because there are those on the left who will say, wait a minute, that's not exactly what he was saying. So let's be fair. Brad, I'm going to throw it to you. That seems to be the tagline that everybody is using right now, that it is the policies of the president and that he was taken out of context. Are you going for that, or would you just admit that, yes, his policies are indeed there?
Well, honestly, I don't think it's policies that's the problem. I think it's the way he projects himself and communicates to the public. I think the president's done a lot during his presidency, but has done a damn poor job communicating it to voters. And let me say one other thing. If you look at the national polls, yes, Barack Obama's job rating is down, but the poll ratings for the Republican leadership in Congress are in the toilet. And I think that's because they block things like the minimum wage, equal pay for women, and they're paying the price. And if you look at the Republican campaigns, they're not offering an agenda.
All right, so let's talk about an agenda going forward here then for a second.
Obama's bad, but nothing of their own.
Let's talk about an agenda going forward here. Brad, I'm going to remain with you right now. If indeed the Republicans do take complete control at this point, there are those who feel that it's still going to be a nightmare. No one still wants to compromise on this. And the Republicans, as a matter of fact, Brad, you even have to admit a lot of Democrats are really sort of quietly hoping the Republicans get in power, because they're hoping the Republicans come up with no ideas whatsoever and basically fail, correct?
Oh, yeah. Well, let me put it this way. They have failed to present any new ideas. A good example, Mitch McConnell debated his Democratic challenger, I think, on Monday night. He called for the complete repeal of Obamacare, but failed to say how the Kentuckians who have health insurance for the first time under ACA, what's going to happen to them? What's going to happen to the safeguards in ACA that protect the health insurance companies, like treating their patients like cattle? Obama's great at criticizing Obamacare, but he hasn't offered his own alternative, and that's what Americans want, to break through the gridlock.
All right, Alana Marie, I'm going to get to you on this. He's exactly right in some aspects. The new ideas. I got a couple of minutes left here. What are the Republicans going to do with some new ideas? Because in many aspects, they haven't come forward and really put them down on paper.
There are new ideas. You know, there was the American Health Care Reform Act, which I didn't necessarily agree with, which I still think is way too much government intervention. But there are other alternatives to Obamacare. And honestly, some 52% of the country is against Obamacare. You know, currently, that's a huge number. That's a direct reflection. You take the millennials, for example, who are critical in some of these votes, this 18 to 33 group, which are mostly liberal. It is actually Obamacare that is turning them away from, you know, this get out the vote. They don't want anything to do with Obamacare. They don't want to be forced to get health care insurance when they're young, they're healthy. They're not signing up. So in one sense, the Democrats and Obama has done himself a huge disservice with Obamacare because he's turned off.
Okay, well, we've talked about Obamacare, and I've only got a short time left here. Would you agree with those who say that if the Republicans gain control of Congress, unless they are positive and get something done, it could affect them in 2016?
I would agree that it could affect them in 2016. I do think that they will put forth a lot of alternatives, and I actually think, in all honesty, if the Republicans do take the Senate, you know, if Democrats actually show up and vote, even though they're completely disillusioned, and, you know, the rose is off the bloom is off the rose, however you look at it, they're not enamored with him anymore. So they may not even show up to vote because they want to check him.
All right,
they may
Brad,
want to just check Obama and not show up. But I would say this: if the Democrats lose and the Republicans regain the Senate.
Okay, I tell you what, Alana, hang on one sec. Alana, you got your point in there. I got 20 seconds left. Brad, go ahead. Brad, you got 20 seconds. Go.
The Wall Street Journal issued a national poll yesterday that showed that 55% of Americans want a congressional candidate who'll give Obamacare a chance to work.
All right, there you go. That'll have to be the last word right now. I can see because I'm looking right there. Alana's just shaking her head no. We're all out of time. We're going to come back and do it again. Thank you both for being here today.
Let's do it again. Thank you so much.
All right. Later on this hour, time for Americans to stop whining about Ebola, or at the very least stop worrying. And after the break, good reasons why consumers at the very least seem to be happier these days. The Money Master has that and more right here.
Executive order to tighten security on debit cards. I'm Miranda Kahn, and this story tops your Newsmax Now update. The order requires federally issued debit cards to have a chip replacing the magnetic strips. The president's goal is to reduce fraud. Turning now from economic security to health security, President Obama appoints Ron Klain to head the government's response to Ebola. Meanwhile, doctors at the National Institutes of Health say nurse Nina Pham is now in fair condition. Pham contracted Ebola while caring for victim Thomas Duncan. Health officials moved her to the NIH facility last night. The Pentagon says the Syrian city of Kobani may fall to ISIS. Kurdish fighters have been holding off the militants for weeks now with help from U.S.-led airstrikes. That was your latest Newsmax Now update. More coming your way in 30 minutes.